With Himeko Nova just coming up in a little over a day, I'm sure many players are torn whether they should or should not pull for her. In this video, I'm going to be talking about Himeko herself and what makes her relatively strong, also overlooking her vertical investment, the early ones such as E1, S1, and E2, and giving my thoughts on that as well, especially something I do consider, and is something very important you should know. Finally, I will be talking about the reasons why you should or should not pull, and at the very end, for the people that have decided to pull, I will be talking about whether you should go for E1, S1, E2, S0, so on and so forth. Vertical investment guide. Stuck grinding in Honkai Star Rail? Need stellar Jades fast? We've got you covered. Head over to U7 Buy, your ultimate gaming hub for safe, fast, and cheap in-game top-ups. Whether it's Star Rail or your other favorite games, U7 delivers instantly and players love it. Check out their Trustpilot reviews, they're actually top ranked. On the Honkai Star Rail top-up page, you can recharge your account in seconds. When you head over to the page, all you need to do is pick the pack you do want, enter your UID and server, and buy now. If you want codes and coupons to apply, be sure to create an account for proper savings. USD is a recommended usage currency for best saving. Once everything is set, you can see the savings you're about to get. Want even extra savings? Be sure to use code PRESR at checkout for 5% off. Perfect for last minute pulls or surprising a friend. Click on the link in the description, recharge fast, save more, and keep blazing those trails. So Himeko Nova herself is a brand new DPS. She has a lot of unique things to her, such as her unique assist skills, a very potent ultimate, which is going to be a big source of her damage. The primary sources of her damage comes from her actual ultimate and also comes from her assist skill, as you do use it a bunch throughout the battle. Having relatively good uptime on these, pretty good self buffs such as crit damage and stuff, even alt-type res pen from her talent, which is a rare buff, and also having very high multipliers at the same time. She does have a lot of stuff going out for her. And then she also has a very unique mode, either being the verdict mode or the decimation mode, which does change depending on who uses the assist skill from the Trailblaze Companion category. If you're unaware, Trailblaze Companion is a new little tag being added for Himeko specifically, and just in general, characters can be tagged as Trailblaze Companion. That obviously being the Trailblazers themselves, both Himekos, all forms of March, including Evernight, all Dawnhang forms, Welt, and Sunday. And if there are any future characters to come that end up joining the Astral Express, they are most likely going to be added to this tag, which is one of the benefits to Himeko. If there's a future character that doesn't necessarily buff Himeko directly, but has synergy and they become a Trailblaze Companion, boom, there's a chance there will be added to this. So depending on the teammates you do run, you can activate either Verdict or Decimation, which does change as they are situationally better than the other. With vertical investment, it seems like Verdict does scale better, but with Verdict, you're able to increase the damage dealt by Himeko by 100% and ultimate damage by an additional 100%, and teammates using their ultimates 2 times will let Himeko launch an assist skill at the enemy with no cost consumed. For Decimation, instead, it would increase all allies crit damage by 100% and crit damage dealt by skills by 100%, and the requirement for the free assist skill at no charge would be enemies being hit by allies. So once you hit a total of 9 enemies with an ally, so if you hit multiple enemies, it becomes that much better. You're able to get up to 9 charges, consume the 9 charges, and then the assist skill is launched. Both of these have their different scenarios, as Verdict is much better for Himeko's damage, which she is going to be the primary DPS. However, Decimation can also help some other characters on the team doing damage, such as if you're running a Welt, we know Welt can actually deal very solid damage, and most of his damage comes from his skill, so the crit damage dealt by skill is nice. Unfortunately, a lot of it is actually, and I mean most of it, is going to be from the additional damage procs and stuff. So that works a bit different, but it's still getting an increase in the end. But Verdict does seem to actually scale better with the actual vertical investment you do, but even in scenarios, there are times you would be balancing both. Her synergy with Trailblaze Companions is also very crucial, as she is able to give them an extra turn when assist skill is casted on the Trailblaze Companion side. So if it goes to their turn, you use the assist skill. For anyone else, unless you do have E2, it would just consume the turn, but if they're Trailblaze Companion, they get an extra turn. So you can use the assist skill, activate the mode, do whatever, you get the damage from the assist skill, and then you can use your attack from the Trailblaze Companion themselves. So these assist skills you're going to be using a lot throughout the battle. The Decimation or Verdict mode is going to proc a bunch of them. That's going to be the biggest source of the procs. She's able to refresh the assist skills at the start of her turn. She's also able to increase the team's damage by a little bit thanks to her skill. But the biggest damage you see is packed into her ultimate, as she is able to do fire damage up to 762% of Himeko's attack to a designated enemy and 252% to other targets. You can fire a beam when you do have 3 source energy, which is like the big hit, and then you can do 3 slashes and then beam, 3 slashes, beam. And then at the very end, you would have a final hit, which is going to be a big damage done, which also can change depending on the enemies. And in general, since her base kit also does have the res pen increase, at a baseline, if you don't have anyone else on the team doing stuff res related, you can very much run her on battles that have fire res. it still would be a better idea to take someone else in that case, since if you take someone that has an innate advantage, taking 20% res down to technically considered 0% is going to be good, but fighting an enemy that has 0% for like imaginary res and you can take it down to 20% is going to be overall better. However, Himeko does have some brute forcing potential at an early investment as well. So she does have a lot of stuff going for her, but let's finally talk about her vertical investment. So she has a really good vertical investment from being a main push. Her E1 is insane, her E2 is bonkers, her light cone is very good. Going in order, her E1 is able to increase the number of time the talent triggers the extra assist skill effect by 1, and then a quality of life for the verdict and decimation state. The verdict state now only needs 1 ultimate to launch the assist skill, which is going to be insanely good for damage potential and quality of life. However, for decimation, you reduce the numbers of attacks needed against enemies by 3. So instead of 9 charges, you just need 6. So 1 ultimate on verdict and 6 charges on decimation. Also, when Himeko Nova launches the assist skill, the number of times the extra damage effect is triggered will be increased by 1. So this is just insane. You get a actual assist skill proc and no charge with just 1 ultimate going off, and then for decimation, you just need 6 hits, which you have a team usually full of characters that have AoE. There's usually one like action advanced support that maybe not have it, but usually in the form of like Welt, or if you're even running a sustain like Permanentary Danhang with their Soul Dragon hits and stuff, there's a lot of ways you can get this end up charging the decimation state. For verdict state, you just have anyone that has loops really quickly on ultimates, such as Welt himself. So the E1 is just such an insane quality of life, and then the E2, max number of Himeko assist skills increases to 2. Damage up by ultimate and assist skill become 130% of their original damage. As long as you have her skill state up at the start of her turn, immediately recovers 1 extra assist skill use. And then her trace that was able to give Trailblaze companions an extra turn when using an assist skill is now something that applies to non-Trailblaze companions. So on teams where you have someone like Sparkle and Mortanix even, when you use an assist skill on their turn, you're not going to activate or change from verdict to decimation or anything like that, unfortunately, because they have to be Trailblaze companion. However, they will still gain the extra turn, which is really good. So insane damage increase by making ultimate and assist skill damage 130% of the original damage, which is always some of the best scalings you can get. More damage you do originally significantly amplifies with an original damage increase. It's not a generic 30% damage increase, it's an original damage increase, making it multiplicative. And then on top of that, the quality of life of giving non-Trailblaze companions the extra turn. Finally, for her light cone, it's also very solid, with a 32% defense ignore when doing damage, where using assist skill will regenerate 6 energy and gain a sail effect for 2 turns, stacking up to 3 times, with each stack increasing assist skill damage by 20%, and reaching 3 stacks will make each sail stack increase ultimate damage by 20%. 32% defense ignore, 6 energy on assist skill cast, and up to 60% skill damage and 60% ultimate damage is absurd. This is a very packed light cone, and it just does a lot. Just for the defense ignore, that's also a very valuable part. Depending on investment, at times and certain teams, you might overcap, but you won't always overcap by too much. Like, let's say you're running a team of Mortanix, Welt, which are known for their defense shred, and then on top of this, the Himeko light cone. The Himeko light cone has 32%, Welt's debuff active will make it a total of 72%, and then the extra one from Mortanix Blade in his state is a extra 30%, so it's 102%, just 2% overcap, doesn't really matter. And then if your last law, that also depends if you're running an E2 Sparkle, then in that case, it becomes a lot less powerful just because you have an extra 30% from that. But that would of course depend from player to player. What this light cone does innately is just insanely strong. But now I want to talk about something. The problem with having this vertical investment so strong, which isn't inherently a problem, but it's more of a base kit to dupe ratio, and that is the odds of becoming an E1/E2 merchant. Due to how good these dupes are, and due to how kind of weird she can seem at E0 with how long it might take to get the extra assist skill, and how so much potential is locked behind the quality of life of E1 and the power of E2, similar to what we had with Finon last year, I can very much see that right now at E0, S1 or something, she is going to perform good, especially if you have her right teammates at the right investment. However, I can very much see her devolving into a E1 at least merchant, but I can also see E2. I just think mainly E1 because of that extra quality of life of lowering the verdict charge by 1 and lowering the decimation charge by 3. That is going to be the main thing, but I also don't know how much it's going to be for the max use of assist skills being increased to 2, and also the extra quality of life of giving the Trailblaze companions or non-Trailblaze companions an extra turn. That's also just insane, so that's why our E2 is so powerful, but I do think the main merchant part is going to come from the E1. So that's something I do want to give a bit of wary to. When she does release, I can very much see her being like, yeah, she's performing really good at E0, but very quickly, similar to Finon, I think the performance without E1 and maybe even E2 is very very much going to end up happening and falling off a lot without them. Hence why a lot of showcases end up coming out with E2 especially, and that's how the low costs are. They have like E2S0 or E2S1 with no dupes in the other characters. Usually how you get the cost to look low, but that's also the indicator that the character really needs the E2. So for anyone that might think that she might be like a complete unit at E0, I do want to have this section for you to be a bit wary on that. Now finally, reasons why you should or should not pull for Himeko Nova. As I always say, for DPSs, it really depends if you are in need of one. If you're already someone that has 3 teams across the modes, with their main DPS and their full team setups, maybe even with investment, then in that case, you might be better off just allocating your pulls into making said team stronger. Let's say maybe one of your teams is a Noxa, one of your teams is Remembrance, and your last team is, let's say, Elation. Let's say the Remembrance team is one variant with Mortanic Blade instead, just so Cyrene can go to the Anoxa. Instead, it'd be better to maybe save to get the E2 Cyrene for your Anoxa, as that's where a lot of power is locked. Or on the Mortanic Blade on Remembrance team, getting his E1, getting Evernight's E1, S1, getting Castra's E2. On the Elation side, you have E2 Silverwolf or E1 Evanestia if you're using her instead, E1 Yagwang, S1 Yagwang. The potential future sustain that's probably not going to be too far from now. If you already have that whole setup, then there's not much need for you to add Himeko to your roster, as your teams are already set. You just need to invest in them so they can clear as long as possible. However, if you're not in that case and you're looking for another DPS, Himeko Nova, I do recommend her if you are able to one, have the right teammates prepared, which range from setups like Sparkle. If you're able to get E2 Himeko, there's Ceredra. Mortanic's Blade generally is just good for everyone, to be honest, but Himeko also gets a great benefit from him. And Welt. Welt is one of the most characters in demand for Himeko. So the whole E4 Welt scenario, again, even at like E2, honestly, Welt is just really good. And then especially if you don't have a fully invested in Himeko, where Verdict might not always be better than Decimation, Welt is also a good activator of Decimation, especially since his debuffs, especially at E4, is just insane. That's why he's like the cost cheating character. And then generally what he does with the whole action delay stuff is very good, especially with how many times you have the Himeko assist go proc go out. You can stack up that damage bonus trace he has for the team, the ultimate hitting a bunch of times, so on and so forth. Well, just does a lot. So if you have these teammates laying around and ready to use, like let's say if you're going for just like a E0 to E1 Himeko, maybe if you have a Sparkle to use, especially if you have Well to use. What I'm trying to say is if you do have the right teammates ready, then of course Himeko would be great, as you don't really want to pull a DPS without the proper team nowadays. Especially not in a case for Himeko where you really want the proper teams. She's lesser of a character where you do unconventional stuff. It's not really back like a 3.x where someone like a Noxa could use everyone, someone like Finon could use everyone. It's a little less so now, so you do want to definitely have the right team ready. So if you're in the scenario of you need a DPS, you have the right team, Himeko Nova is going to be good. And if you especially are able to invest into an E1 and or E2, highly recommended, because I can see a E2 S1 Himeko being the top tier DPS for a good chunk of time to come. Just like a Finon, an E2 S1 Finon, or honestly, even an E2S0 Finon is still really damn good. Sure, maybe in the future you might need a bit more investment on the team, but E2S1 Himeko, I guarantee you, is going to be performing very strong, as their damage is very ridiculous at that level, and then all the quality knives you would want is in fact in those dupes, so you would be pretty much good to go. There's not really much else you would ask for, except the idea of an after sales unit, which could always happen, and then if there is an after sales unit, you want to look out for that. So that's another thing I want to mention. If you do pull for her, if you go for investment, whatever, be sure you do have some ability to save for the after sales unit, as you always want to pull them for said main character. You wanted to pull the Remembrance units for Castrus when she came out, you wanted to get Ceredra for Finon, so on and so forth. And then for people who wouldn't want to summon in this case, if you can't really invest into her, and or you had the first case scenario where you already have enough teams set up and you're better allocating pulls to them, then not much point in that case. Himeko isn't necessarily a character I would recommend pulling if you aren't able to willingly invest into her E1, E2, just for future's sake. Unless you really do like her, which in that case you probably wouldn't be watching this video anyways. So if you're someone that can't really invest into her, like let's say maybe E0 S0, you maybe already have her teammates kind of used up, and they're in other teams that you really need them on. And then the main thing, if you already have your team set, in that case, I would not really pull for Himeko. Finally, the very last part, how should you go about vertically investing into Himeko? So the scenario I want to talk about first is if you are between E1 and S1. If you do own Herda signature, and I mean the Herda signature, then it is better to go for E1. However, if you do not own the Herda signature, then you want to go for her S1. That is going to net you the best results. The best possible vertical investment category, however, is going to be E1 E1 S0, then E2 S0, then E2 S1. So if you are able to go to E1 and then E2, then go for the E1 and E2 first. Just be sure you get that. That's going to be the best ability. If you have E2 S0 as opposed to like E1 S1, E2 S0 is going to overall be better. Her light cone is very stacked, but specifically for people that can only do E1 or S1 and that's kind of it. If you don't have the Herta signature, then go for E0 S1. If you have the Herta signature, give that to Himeko and then run E1 S0. But S1 in this case, the Herta signature. So once again, E2 S0 is going to be the best. You want to go for E1, then E2, then S1. That is the best possible way. But if you can only choose E1 or S1, then you would go for her S1 if you don't have the Herta sig. If you have the Herta sig and you can put it on Himeko, then you would go for the E1 instead. And that is the full Himeko guide talking about what makes her good and stuff to consider. Vertical investment overview and what to consider about it as well. Reasons to pull or not. And finally, vertical investment priority. I do hope you found this video helpful. If you did, drop a like would be greatly appreciated. If you're new to the channel or haven't done so already, be sure to subscribe and turn on the bell icon for future videos like this along with all the tips to all content. And I'll see you later. Peace out.